So in my D&D setting, there's this barren, Arctic land that is claimed by the Kingdom of Tesseralia. The thing about the Arctic for us squishy human people in the real world is that it is rarely habitable and difficult to get the resources necessary to survive. So then I thought, okay, well, this is a magical world with a bunch of different creatures and plants, so surely there are some civilizations that could survive, right? And Wizards of the Coast gives some guide on how Arctic life is, right? No, there's none of that. The Icewind Dale module comes out and mentions that there are 10 established towns that are starving and dying and forcing massive beasts to fall off cliffs in order to eat them for survival. Don't Goliaths have cold resistance because they can live in these environments? I digress. So instead of thinking about the civilizations, I thought, okay, other than harsh environmental factors, what else prevents people from living here? And as the words slipped from my mouth and the page in the monster manual turned, the deep blue writhing insectoid on page 258 stared me in the face. The Remorhaz. What if the reason the Arctic was so ridiculously hostile wasn't only the weather and crops, which might be able to be overcome by certain races or fantasy plants, but also the creatures that live there? Let's talk about the Remorhaz as a threat to the adventuring parties that explore the nothingness of the Arctic. I'll outline a little encounter that you can have with one that is sure to build tension and suspense, and it offers a nice reward at the end. Certainly will be memorable and make the adventurers feel like they are survival experts. The Remorhaz is a huge monstrosity that buries deep underground in icy environments. It has an internal heating system that is used to produce massive amounts of warmth to maintain a proper body temperature, and the spikes on its back that glow that orange color seem to vent off the extra heat. Also, the chitin on the outside of these creatures is extremely durable. They eat polar bears, they can grow to be 40 feet long, and they sit and wait to hear vibrations above the surface and then strike, oftentimes swallowing you whole. So, an encounter might be set up like this. The party is traveling in the Arctic when one of them spots a small lump appear in the snow 10 feet ahead, as if something underneath pushed up slightly. It's up to the party on what to do then. Maybe it's something emerging from a cave. Dinner for tonight? The hyper-cautious might wait for more or throw something in that direction. Regardless, the Remorhaz has stopped moving because it may have detected vibrations and will snap at anything that vibrates closer. An item thrown and a plonking to the ground would trigger a 40-foot centipede monster crashing out of the frozen land and swallowing it whole. Or, if it was a character, so be it. Depending on the party, this encounter could be kind of short. I recommend letting the Remorhaz retreat, burrowing itself underground if it's taking too much damage. Remember, it's concerned about its own survival, and a smart monster is a believable monster. A knowledgeable party member might be able to identify the Remorhaz as a polar worm or something along those lines. A deadly Arctic hunter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Why don't we see how the party fight would actually happen? Well, it's more than likely on a first go, the Remorhaz surprises and chomps on a character. The Remorhaz must first bite, which grapples, then restrains, then on another successful bite, swallows. Being swallowed does large amounts of acid damage from digestive fluids and the burning heat from inside the body. But what about those on the outside? The Remorhaz's heated body does constant fire damage to those even in the mere presence of the creature, which means it must be letting off tons of heat. In fact, in Dragon Magazine number 2, where this creepy crawly was introduced, it's even said that non-magical weapons that touched this thing instantly melted. It's also worth noting that it is immune to both fire and cold damage. Right after the first attack, as the retreat takes place, maybe the Remorhaz swallows something important to the party, like an item, or the monster hunter needs its head as a trophy, or the artificer knows exactly what to craft from its remains. Regardless of the options, you should allow the party to feel like they need to track this thing down. Give incentive to do so. Remember, they could still be scared for their life. Survival out in the Arctic is already very tough, but now imagine the stress of thinking that this thing could burst out of the ground and eat you at any moment. It might be kill or be killed. Can we make this creature more interesting, though? One way is to expand upon the trait mentioned earlier of melting weapons on command. I would make it similar to the Rust monsters, where any non-magical weapon made of metal or wood that hits the Remorhaz starts to melt. After dealing damage, the weapon takes a permanent, cumulative -2 penalty to damage rolls, and if its penalty drops below 6, the weapon is destroyed. It's a simple thing to make the Remorhaz harder, but let's involve a weakness or two as well to make the adventurers feel smart and heroic. One way is to include the chitinous shell in some way. After enough bludgeoning damage, maybe 50 or 80 damage depending on the output of the party, the chitin might crack in some areas, exposing a soft worm underneath that allows the party to score an extra attack die of damage, or maybe just an extra +5. Or maybe on rolls above 20 with piercing weapons, allows a character to slide the stab through gaps in the exoskeleton, also dealing that extra damage. So what would be the reward for taking down a monster such as this? Well, the chitin could be harvested and made into chitin armor. Back in the 3rd edition, chitin armor cost around 75 gold pieces and weighed 20 pounds. If a Remorhaz weighs 10,000 pounds, from the 3.5e monster manual, and chitin makes up maybe a quarter of that, the max harvest would be around 2,500 pounds of chitin. That's a pretty good haul if characters are adept in the ways of monster harvesting. In the future, we plan on releasing homebrew packs on harvesting and crafting, so certainly stay tuned. Another harvestable good was a secretion of the Remorhaz called thrime or thrim. Apparently, alchemists enjoyed its properties and used it to make heat-related magic items, so maybe a potion of fire breath or a ring of warmth. If a Remorhaz is killed near a nest, maybe the eggs can be taken. Certainly good food, but the party could try to tame a baby Remorhaz. As it's mentioned, frost giants tried to tame them, but sometimes they would turn on their masters, so good luck with that one. I made a small document that outlines some of the changes that we made today to the Remorhaz to make it a more interesting and compelling encounter. I linked it down in the description. It goes to our Patreon, but it's a free download. I hope you liked the video. If you did, consider subscribing. It helps the channel in these early days. And also check out our Patreon for that document and for other really great content. Thanks.